I've set my background color to yellow and the fill color for any shape that will be drawn on the canvas is red. And I want to draw 5 different circles with the following information that I've typed up here. Basically, the first circle will have an x-coordinate of 200, a y-coordinate of 300, and a radius of 10. The second circle will have an x-coordinate of 150, a y-coordinate of 120, and a radius of 30, and so on. And I don't want to call the ellipse function multiple times, so a for loop might be useful here. However, the problem is that each of these circles are different from the others, so we need a way to store this information in our program so that we can access it later during the looping process while we're drawing our circles. Here's where arrays become useful. They're very much like variables, but instead of storing just one value, they can store a whole set of values. So here I've created 3 arrays. The first array stores the x-coordinate of our 5 circles, the second stores the y-coordinates, and the third stores the radiuses, or radii rather, of our 5 circles. Each value in the array is an element of the array, and each element has an index number, which is basically like a numbering system for the information that you store on your array. The important thing to note is that the index starts from 0, so the first element has an index number of 0, and the second element has an index number of 1, the third element has an index number of 2, and so on. To access the values from the array, I type the array name and then in square brackets, I put the index number of the value that I'm trying to access. So in this case, I'm trying to access a value stored in array X at index 1, which is the second element of the array, which should be 150. I can pass these values directly as parameters into the ellipse function. So here I've drawn the first circle, which is very small on the canvas, but I've drawn this circle by referring to the value stored at index 0 of each array. And to draw the second circle, I have to access the values stored at index 1 of each array. And because the index numbers increase incrementally, I can use the counter variable in a for loop to access certain elements in the array during each loop while I'm drawing the circle. I've set up a for loop here so that I can draw my circles. Notice that since I want to access the value stored at index 0 during the first loop, I have to initialize my counter variable to 0. And since there are 5 circles, I make sure that I is less than 5 during each loop, and that way the counter variable goes from 0 to 4. And here I can add my ellipse drawing function. Since during each loop the counter variable I increases by 1, I'm using a different set of parameters for each circle that's drawn. I've actually realized now that I've been incorrectly referring to these values as the radius of the circles. These last 2 parameters refer to the entire width and the entire height of the ellipse. And of course, if they're the same, then you basically get a circle. But the point is that these last 2 parameters define the diameter of the circle instead of the radius, which is what we were hoping to get. So since the diameter is twice the radius of the circle, in order to get a circle with a specific radius value, we can make sure that the diameter is twice that radius value. So all I have to do is multiply these last 2 parameters by 2 to get the appropriate radii. Up to now, I've been using the ellipse function to draw my circles, but it has been tedious to type the diameter of the circle twice in the last 2 parameters. And I want a new function that is meant to just draw circles. It should take 3 parameters. The first parameter should indicate the x-coordinate of the circle, the second should indicate the y-coordinate, and the third should indicate the radius of the circle. Fortunately, I can define my own function to do just that. To create a function definition, I start with the keyword var, followed by the name of the function equals, then the keyword function, followed by a set of parentheses, curly braces, and a semicolon. We can define a set of variables in the parentheses that will accept the parameter values that are passed into the circle function whenever it is called. Here I'll use the variables x, y, and r to represent the x-coordinate, y-coordinate, and radius of the circle respectively. Also, take note that the x, y, r variables can only be used within this function definition, and they do not affect the x, y, r variables out here. We say that the x, y, r variables within this function definition are out of scope anywhere else in the program. In the curly braces, I write the piece of code that is to be run whenever the function is called. If I want to draw a circle, I can draw an ellipse with the same width and height as shown here. This ellipse should be located at coordinates x, y, which would be passed in as parameters, and the width and height of the ellipse, which would be the diameters of the circle, should be twice the radius. With the circle function definition complete, I can now use the circle function in my for loop to draw my circles, passing in only 3 parameters instead of 4. And if I wanted to draw an extra circle, I can just call the circle function again as shown here. Lastly, I want to talk about commenting your code. Comments are an easy way to explain what your code is doing. So there are 2 types of comments. First, there's the single line comment, which you can make with a double forward slash. And then there's the multi-line comment, which is between a forward slash asterisk and an asterisk forward slash. Comments don't affect how your program is run, and they're very useful in explaining what your code does in plain English so that other people can understand. So use comments when you can. So that basically wraps up this whole video. There's still a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't gone over yet, such as animating these figures and drawing other shapes besides circles. And I encourage you to come to this site on Khan Academy and explore. There's a friendly documentation section below the programming environment, and this provides bits of code that you can look through and learn from so that you can add it to your own code, and it can be quite fun. I want to make a quick note on programming languages. The language that we've been coding in during this video is JavaScript, but my purpose wasn't really to teach how to program in JavaScript. It was more of just to teach you programming concepts so that it would be easier to get started with any other programming language. I don't think that I'll do tutorials on a specific language in the future, since there are already plenty of those out there and there'd be no point in reiterating that information. But once you familiarize yourself with one programming language, it makes most other programming languages somewhat more comprehensible. Some easier languages that you can start out with are JavaScript and Python. For those who want something slightly more challenging, you can try Java. And for those who are really daring, C or C++. There are many other languages out there that I haven't mentioned, and learning any one of them can give you a valuable skill. So leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing for more. Now this is my first video and the quality might not have been the best for you guys, and I'd appreciate any feedback as to what I could do differently so that these videos can improve. But anyways guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.